Okay, this is part 4 of our look at the JFK assassination. So before we continue, let's just have a recap of what we've already covered. So we first had a look at the scene, the location, which was Dallas in Texas, Dealey Plaza. So there were different levels of location to look at. Then we had a look at the immediate steps taken by police in the aftermath, or the steps that weren't taken, to be honest. And I would say, and I'm not sure a lot of people will argue with me, that there was a lot of negligence on the part of the police, Secret Service, and a few other agencies as well.
Deliberately or otherwise.
Yeah. Okay, and then after that, we moved on to the witnesses. A lot of witnesses, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but a lot of witnesses said there was smoke, there were gunshots from the grassy knoll, and a lot of photographs would support that view. Although it has to be said, some people did say there were shots from the depository, or from that direction at least. So I don't know whether there was anything you wanted to add, Jace, about anything we've covered already.
No, carry on.
Okay, so so we had all these gunshots, but there didn't seem to be anybody obviously shooting. There was nobody you could sort of immediately suspect of committing the murder. So you need to start looking for evidence. We discussed that earlier as well, as we found some of the most important bits of evidence were actually tampered with or disappeared. Like, for example, the body, the car, some of the most important bits that would have been vital in pointing to what had happened, they just were messed about with, basically. We also looked at the bullets. I think we talked about the bullets, and I think there are some supplements as well where you can see an FBI man from the Dallas office, I can't remember his name, and he's actually photographed picking up a bullet 10 minutes after the assassination and pulling in its pocket. That bullet's never seen again, or not by the public anyway. And apparently, I think Roger Craig said there was bone and bone matter, blood on it, on that bullet. So you've got to say, and that was on the south side of the road. So if it had blood matter, if it had bone matter on it, blood on it, you've got to think that was very possibly the bullet did the most damage. And that's an FBI man that's pictured pulling it in his pocket. So if the FBI are doing that, then you've got to think that something's very wrong with this so-called investigation.
I'm quite skeptical about that in itself, in as much as, I mean, I'm no ballistics expert, but I do know that when a bullet hits bone, the bullet disintegrates. It doesn't stay intact. So how would anybody be able to identify that there's a bullet with bone fragment and blood on it?
Well, there's a photograph of him picking up something that had been identified as a bullet. Okay, so so that was kind of like, we were looking at direct evidence, physical evidence. Obviously after that, you need witness testimony. What did they see, and so on. So there's a film I put on the YouTube channel where I think it's Arnold Rowland with his wife and kid, and he said he saw two people on the 6th floor 15 minutes before the shooting. One or both of them had guns. One was at one end of the floor and one at the other end. Harold Brennan? He said he saw Oswald on the 6th floor. Then we have the railway workers on the triple overpass, who said they saw smoke coming from the picket fence. Shots had come from the picket fence. So, you know, there are lots of different testimonies that point to shots from different areas. I wanted, I mean, there are so many of them that support all of those opinions, but let's move on to the film evidence. I mean, if you had a film of the assassination, then you would think it would be very, very important evidence. But I'm not so sure any photographic or movie evidence that there is actually is I'm not sure if it's a help or a hindrance, because a lot of, or almost all of the film was confiscated, and I would say was not confiscated in the interest of investigation integrity. On the contrary, it was confiscated in the interest of hiding what actually had happened. So the most famous film is the Zapruder film, but I think because it's received so much publicity over the year, I sometimes think it kind of masks some of the other evidence, and I sometimes wonder if actually that is deliberate, whether everybody pointing at the Zapruder film, actually whether there is something in one of the other films or in some of the other photos that actually is more revealing. Jace, have you any thoughts about that? That, you know, maybe the Zapruder film is just another diversion, and actually there's something in one of the other visuals that is actually more revealing.
Yeah, I've often thought that. I've often thought that. I mean, there is a school of thought, and I've often thought it myself, that the Zapruder film quality was actually so poor that it actually played into the hands of any possible conspirators or whatever, in as much as it could act as a smokescreen for anything that was actually that was better. There is one bit of footage that was still available that you can see, which is not the Zapruder film, but it's immediately after the limousine has sped away.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's quite telling for me, in as much as it's taken from the opposite side of the grassy knoll.
Yeah.
So from Jackie Kennedy's side of the car.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And it obviously the camera itself was focused on where the limo was before it sped off, with the grassy knoll behind, and also the plinth behind where Zapruder was filming from, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But what's significant for me is there are so many people that instantly run towards that picket fence.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're not just running from the grassy knoll, they're running from the other side. They're running across the road to get there.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
The question is why? Why would they do that? If it was I don't know. I've never been in that situation. I hope I never am in that situation. But you talk about the whole, fight or flight thing. If there's an incident where somebody's kicking off or whatever, most people will go in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
But I would have thought that in such an incident like that, a lot of people would go to try and get the person or persons that have done it, right? That would be a reaction, an instinct, a human reaction, if you like. But what's significant about that is there are one or two characters in amongst all of that medley, whereas across the road, there are one or two characters that are just casually walking along the road in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Almost as though they are Alfred Hitchcock doing a cameo across the road scene.
Yeah.
The rolled up newspaper or whatever, they're just literally going towards the book depository, in fact.
Yeah.
But in a casual way. So you haven't got anybody who is like, shit, I heard those shots come from the book depository. I'm going to run towards the book depository and try and find who that guy was, right? None of that's going on. And you would have thought that, if there were so-say witnesses or whatever that heard the shots from the book depository, that you would have thought in the cluster or the amount of policemen and Secret Service and all the rest of it, that some of them would have heard that as well. And you would have seen them darting towards the book depository.
Yeah.
But no, if anything, what you did see was some policemen, I say policemen in inverted commas, stopping people from running up the grassy knoll. And that, for me, that's actually quite telling, although it doesn't tell you enough.
So actually, there's a picture of the policeman stopping them, is there? Or?
Yeah, it's all in the footage. It's all in the film. It's all in the film. Yeah. I'll try and get it, and I'll try and film it on my phone and then send it to you.
Yeah. So I'd like to see that. So I don't remember seeing the policeman actually stopping.
Well, not necessarily physically stopping, but just sort of like, putting his arms out or whatever, just
that's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's like I said to you before, and we may move on to this, we may touch on this, but playing devil's advocate, and let's say there was a book depository sat there waiting, biding his time, blah blah blah. He or they or she or whoever would have had to have known that A, that route was going to change, B, that the roof was going to be off that car, and C, that they were going to be able to hit the president point blank in the head, or there or thereabouts, from that kind of distance.
Yeah.
In a split second or three. And in order for that to have actually been the case, that person or persons would have had to have been informed of all of those things by somebody else. Therefore, by definition, there's a conspiracy.
Yeah. We'll come back to that later, but just while we're on it, though, I think if Oswald had been acting alone, he would have just shot at Kennedy coming up Houston.
Exactly, yeah. Or from the best advantage point, which would have been on the sidewalk.
Yeah. Yeah. But he would more likely have been caught shooting from the sidewalk, though, wouldn't he?
Well, I don't know. I mean, yes, but then you've got to say if you do something like that, you're never not going to get away with it, right?
Do you know another thing that's crossed my mind? It's just a theory, so I'm not going to say this is what happened. But let's just say there was a police officer or a man in a police uniform that fired from the grassy knoll. And the best way, or maybe if he wanted to escape from that area and not look conspicuous, then the best way would have been to mingle with other police officers. And by police officers going up onto the knoll, if that were the case, then that police officer could just mingle back in, because do you know what happened? They hung around the grassy knoll for a while.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Then they were all called up to the depository. So I just wondered whether that was just a ruse.
Yeah, I've often thought that, and in fact, I watched a program about 20 years ago where somebody actually made a statement to say that they actually saw a police rifleman behind the picket fence, and the only reason they saw them before the gunshot, and they just thought they were in place, guarding the president, whatever. And they said that the only reason they saw them was because the sunlight had caught the badge, and it had deflected off the badge, and it had attracted their attention. So they looked and saw that there was a policeman there, and then they turned away, thought nothing of it. But the policeman had a rifle, right? I've never, since that, it was about 20 years ago, I've never been able to find that interview or even proof that interview or statement even exists. But
where did you see that? It was on
TV. Basically, has repeated that basically pretty much.
It was on TV, or
yeah, it was on TV. It was on I think it was I think it was called On the Trail of the Assassins or something like that. But I've never been able to find it since. So there was a school of thought about that, and then in that particular program, looking at photographs of the picket fence area, and they were looking at sort of little blotches of sunlight, whether that could be a badge, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was looked at in quite depth in that particular program, and it was about 20 years ago I watched it. Yeah, I mean the other thing that has often occurred to me was, if you were a lone nut, you would go into that knowing that you weren't going to get away with it, right? There's no way anybody assassinates anyone and gets away with it in the history of the world, right? So nobody's been able to sort of say, oh, I assassinated whatever, blah, 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 blah. Nobody's ever been in that position. So you would, even if you were a complete crackpot, you would know that you're going to get caught. So you'd be thinking, oh, whatever, I'm going to make sure I actually don't bloody miss. So I'm not going to sit on a 6th floor bloody with trees in the way and everything else, because actually, again, playing devil's advocate, if you accept the fact there was a lone gunman on the 6th floor of that book depository, right, the odds were stacked against him making a direct hit that would actually terminate the life of the president, right? I mean, I don't even know what the odds were, but they were absolutely stacked against him, right? I mean, you've got to be one of the top marksmen in history to pull that off. And if you pull it off,
yeah,
you're not going to get away with it for a start. But if you don't pull it off, like you cock up that shot or whatever, you're still not going to get away with it.
Yeah.
And all you're going to do is draw attention, cause whatever your cause is that you wanted to assassinate the president, blah, blah, blah. But actually, you're just going to make yourself look a twat at the end of the day if you don't make that shot, right? So if you miss, or you hit the lamppost, or you hit the car, or you hit the windshield, or you hit somebody else in the car, I mean, nobody's ever really mentioned this, but what if he'd shot Jackie instead, right? What if he'd taken the head off Jackie Kennedy and JFK had survived?
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, this is a whole different topic, but do you think JFK would have let that lie? No.
The other thing about that is, again, Zapruder. So the president's just been shot. All those people are rushing up to the picket fence. Does he get down off the plinth and join them to wonder? He gets down and then he just goes, like you said, the other direction, back It's like saying to his secretary, "Shall we go back to the office then?" Yeah.
And also, while he's touching on that, they would have you believe. I mean, I'm not sure this would be the case, but they would have you believe that he stopped filming almost the second the limo buggered off, right?
Yeah.
But he didn't get off the plinth. He stayed on the plinth, right? Now, I would have thought the instinct would have been to carry on filming the aftermath and what's going. If you're going to stay in the same place, you carry on filming the aftermath. Now, I know people would say, "Oh, well, you're not in that situation, so you don't know what the shock's going to do to you," and blah blah blah. I get that, but you would get caught up in it if you were there and you are filming. You would at least film some of the aftermath, which is the people running up to the grassy knoll and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, there's something not right.
You probably cut.
Yeah, there's something not right about that. Something not right about that film. Another theory I've had about that is those angles. We're looking at those angles on that footage in the assumption they were taken by Zapruder. So when people are trying to work everything out, they're basing it on that picture, those pictures having been taken by Zapruder on the plinth. But what if actually, like you said this before, that footage was taken by somebody else from a different angle? Then it changes your calculations.
Now, the other thing as well that's floated around in my head as well is the integrity of Zapruder himself.
Yeah.
Right. Now, we know he was open to money because Time Life magazine paid him for the film.
Yeah.
Right. How do we know that whoever was behind the assassination didn't pay him themselves to be that cameraman? Whether he was filming anything or not is irrelevant. They needed a name to go with the film.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. How do we know there was any film in that camera?
We don't.
You know,
I think there was a passage of time. I think there was a passage of time as well between the actual assassination and that recording being made.
Yeah.
And when that recording was actually handed over to anybody, whether it was Time Life or the police or whoever.
Yeah. So that's the other thing I talked about before. So all the other people are getting their cameras confiscated immediately. Which two people didn't have their cameras confiscated?
The two with the footage.
Benjamin Zapruder and Babushka Lady.
Yeah.
So why didn't they have? And they were probably two of the best placed people there. So why didn't they have? Why weren't they accosted by any legal officers?
I personally think it was all part of the plan.
So
I mean, even in 1963, you're not telling me in America, which was far more advanced with people having things like home movie cameras and everything anyway than we were at that particular point. You're not telling me that all those people in Dallas that day, there were only two people that filmed the footage of it. Well, we know that there were more, but because there is, you know, I mean, there were news people there, for crying out loud. There were news cameramen there, for goodness sake, right? And you don't see any of that. You just don't see any of it.
Let's just say I'd taken a movie of a murder. Doesn't matter who was murdered, but everybody knew I'd shot, or probably had shot, what had happened.
Yeah.
And so what do you think the police would do if they knew I had that movie? What do you think they would do? That they would just say, "Oh, you can keep it," or would they say, "We need it"?
No, they would take it. They would absolutely take it.
They would take it. So
I know that for a fact.
So why? So I'm not sure. In the why was why was Life magazine able to keep a hold of that and not actually have to divulge what was in it to the public?
Yeah. It's all a massive smokescreen as far as I'm concerned, massive. And I don't suppose we'll ever get to the bottom of that.
No, and instead of putting it on TV and saying this is what happened, we get people like Dan Rather going to have a look at it on our behalf and report back wrongly what was in it.
Yeah.
Or maybe he didn't report wrongly. Maybe it changed after he'd taken a look. And then you had pictures, little snippets in the magazine from time to time. And then I think one of the most important bits on the film, they said they'd inadvertently damaged, I think, spilt coffee on it or something.
Yeah. Yeah. And the bits of that Zapruder film that we keep getting shown and keep seeing all the time, like I said, they've got the spool reels down the side that don't move when the rest of the film moves, and all of that kind of stuff. But, they wouldn't be on the original. And the fact that, as you say, he must have been the world's worst bloody videographer to have all that stuff above Kennedy's head and very little of Kennedy in that shot.
That's because they've cut out there's something there that that they don't want us to see.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and then you've got to wonder, man, you talk about smokes and mirrors, so you're kind of, you're wondering, is that something kosher in there, or is that being put in there deliberately? So I forget, was it the Willis film, which is shot from behind the presidential limousine at the time of the shooting, and then when you look over to the stockade, the picket fence, there's what they call Black Dog Man, and you think, well, that's just somebody having a joke, or has it actually just been blacked out? That's the other thing about a lot of those pictures. Just where you want to have a closer look, there's an awful lot of black. If you know what I mean, there's a lot of blacking.
Yeah.
And if they've deliberately made it darker, then you've got to think there's something there they don't want you to see. But the other thing about that is, and we talked about this as well before, you read those, Arnold, is it Gordon Arnold? And you hear there was a woman with a baby and what looked like her husband. They're sitting at a table there, and that when you see the pictures, there's nobody there.
Yeah.
So you've got all these people saying, yeah, I was there. There were a couple of police officers. When you look at the picture, I can't see those people. Where the hell are they?
Yeah.
And I think I also showed, in one of those visuals, in one picture, there are 3 guys stood on the steps. Then you look at another picture, there's just 2 guys. And then there's that Black Dog Man is way back up at the top of the slope.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, like I said, that the guys or people that you see walking in the other direction to the amount of people rushing up towards the picket fence.
Yeah.
They're just casually walking as though they're going for their next bus or whatever.
Yeah.
Towards the book depository area.
Yeah. Something happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What's going on? Yeah. Did I miss something? Did somebody break wind? Whatever, kind of thing. If I'd have been a policeman there on the day, I'd have been stopping those people and saying, what are you doing? What have you seen? Where have you been? Blah blah blah. Where are you going? You know, why are you in such a hurry, but not a hurry, if you know what I mean? Why are you in such a hurry to leave the area, but you're not in a hurry? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all a little bit dodgy.
Yeah, the other thing about that as well, babushka lady. So if you look at those pictures, everybody's stood on the curbside.
Yeah.
They want to get close to the president. They want to say hello. They want to be heard. And yet, especially on the south side of Elm,
yeah,
everybody stood curbside except babushka lady. She stood way back. What's that all about? I mean, and there weren't a lot of people there, so that's also strange as well. So yeah, I think, you know, some of the other photos as well, there was some people have said there was movement in the sixth floor window and so on.
Well, they discarded all the witness testimonies from the prisoners in the building opposite, who were literally on the same level.
Yeah,
they were on the same level, and they were looking directly across at the book depository.
Yeah.
And they discarded all of those. They were disregarded rather all of those statements.
Yeah.
Because they were prisoners. Unreliable witnesses, they were called.
Yeah.
How can you have an unreliable witness if they've got two eyes?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like in the movie, isn't it? JFK, when that fictional character, I can't remember his name, Jim Garrison, one of Jim Garrison's sidekicks, said, I don't know, something similar to you. I don't know why, if just because they're not straight, they can't have two good eyes, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I think we can agree that just like the body, just like the car, the photographic, the movie evidence is also being tampered with. It's like all the evidence, even the testimony, everything is being messed about.
It's just constructed, scripted, the whole thing.
Yeah.
The only thing that was blank, everything was preordained, and the only thing that was blank was just the actual bullet to the head.
Yeah.
Ironically. And well, the other stray bullets as well, but the actual firing of the gun or guns was just the final piece of that whole constructed scenario.
Yeah.
I believe.
Okay, so anyway, so everything's very unsatisfactory. This is not even a bad investigation. It's obviously a cover-up.
Turkey shoot, man.
So, yeah, on the police officer. Yeah, I personally think it's something along those lines. The bigger the lie, the more people believe it.
Yeah, and you can say that. You can say that about so many things. And I don't want to digress from this, but you can say that about the moon landing. You can say it about Diana. All of those massive things that have generated conspiracy after conspiracy theory, right down the lines. Right now, I always say there's no conspiracy theory in the first place if everything is in place as it should be. You can't make a conspiracy if all of the evidence is presented. You just can't.
Well, I think, you know, conspiracies happen all the time. I mean,
yeah, they do.
most of the news you read, you know, I mean, we've got the Johnson scandals going on at the moment. Most of those are conspiracies because it's like him and his cohorts getting together to, I mean, that's conspiracy. It's not a theory. Well, it is a theory.
But it annoys me when people say to me, oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist or you're just a conspiracy nut, right? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I just question stuff, and I question stuff that isn't readily conclusive, right? And a conspiracy, by definition, as an event, is an event or an occurrence which is planned and or orchestrated by more than one person.
I mean, well, that happens all the time. It happens.
Yeah, exactly.
But
for it not to be a conspiracy, the assassin of JFK would have to have been a lone nut gunman, right?
Yeah.
And we've already proved beyond doubt by what we've discussed about that it could not have been. We haven't proved that it wasn't him, but we haven't disproved the fact that, you know, it would have to have been planned or orchestrated. Even if he was the lone assassin, he would have to have been helped by somebody or some persons telling him that the route was changed, telling him that the roof was changed, telling him, you know, all kinds of shit, and so that he would know what was going to happen, right?
Okay. Yeah. So, well, personally, you know, conspiracy, that's just labeling. I mean, it's just people who don't want to argue the points. They just
lazy.
They don't. Yeah, they don't. Well, it's more than lazy. It's because they just want to rubbish a case without actually discussing it. So, okay, so and you know who coined the phrase conspiracy theory, don't you? It was the CIA. So,
yeah.
So anyway, yeah. Let's move on then to motive. So who had motive? So let's start off as local as possible. So who was in the limousine? Next to him was Jackie. From all accounts, he was a womanizer. So and I don't know, I've heard conflicting stories about how Jackie received all that. And, you know, I've read stuff where it said she wasn't actually a one-man woman either. I don't, you know, I mean, it's difficult to know how much of that's true. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really interested that much.
But the thing is, we have to ask the question, was he a womanizer, or was all that... Yeah, was all that created to make people turn against him? That's
right. Yeah, I mean, I suspect he was, but
he was as well. But
yeah, but you know, there's a lot of shit that's been written about him. So so if he was a womanizer, then you might say that was a motive for Jackie. I don't know whether there would have been she would have had any other reasons to do something like that.
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting about Jackie. I always found curious that, you know, at the time she was possibly the most famous woman in the world, right? Arguably. And you hear all kinds of reports, you read all kinds of stuff about, you know, the glamorous Jackie Kennedy, blah, blah, blah. For me personally, I didn't, you know, she wasn't anything special. She was just a ordinary looking woman, you know. She wasn't like drop dead film star gorgeous kind of thing, as far as I'm concerned. But again, that is just my personal opinion. But the American public loved her.
Yeah.
Loved her more than they did Jack, right? And a lot of people say that without her, he probably wouldn't have got as many votes as he got.
Yeah, I think there's probably some truth in that. I hadn't thought about that myself, but I suspect there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah. Because believe it or not, the first lady in America is actually quite an important figure, right? So it's almost like they wanted, sort of young housewives at the time, somebody to relate to, and all of that kind of stuff. And the fact that Jack Kennedy himself was I think he was the youngest president ever at that point.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah,
I think you might be right.
So they were appealing or trying to appeal to a whole new generation of voters, whatever, squeaky clean, American, wholesome living people, blah, blah, blah. Where was I going with this? Yeah, so Jackie, what I always thought was interesting was, at the time of his assassination, she was possibly, or arguably, the most famous woman in the world, possibly alongside, maybe Princess Grace or Grace Kelly as she was then, possibly Monroe, possibly even a queen at the time. So she was a cluster of the world's most famous women, right, of the time. And then wasn't that long after he died that she married Aristotle Onassis, who was the richest man in the world.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't exactly that she came across as like the grieving widow kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know how long after the assassination was it. I don't know, to be honest.
Well, it wasn't that long before she got together with Aristotle Onassis. And it doesn't, there's some people have said they were actually together before, I don't know whether that's true or not, but.
Okay, so anyway, she wasn't without motive. So then who was sat opposite him? There was John Connolly.
Governor Connolly, yeah.
So even though he was a Democrat, he actually later joined the Republican Party. And he had close ties with Lyndon Johnson. As I said before as well, Lyndon Johnson was in hot water, very hot water, and was facing serious corruption charges if proceedings had continued, which they stopped doing as soon as the assassination took place. So, I think Connolly also was involved with some dodgy dealings during his time. So possibly because of his links to Johnson, or possibly because he had links to the defense industry. Financially, he could have been losing out. So on the political front, I'm not sure where he stood in relation to what Kennedy was doing. So, but I think he wasn't without motive.
Although he was shot himself.
Yeah, he was shot himself. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying he did it. I'm just trying to weigh up whether they had motive or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
He shot himself.
But if he was behind it and then ended up getting shot himself, that was a bit of a bloody faux pas. I don't think I think you could rule out. I think you could rule out anybody that was in the car, only because, like I said to you before, the actual chances of that gunman or a gunman or gunmen being that accurate from the sixth floor depository. Yeah. I would not have been sort of saying, right, we're going to arrange a shoot. We're going to arrange a shoot from the sixth floor window.
That's right.
In an open top car. And by the way, I'm going to be sitting in it. No, I wouldn't be.
Yeah, that to me. So that's one argument against the driver and the passenger not being involved, although not necessarily in my opinion, but because as you say, I mean, with six people in the car, I mean, the rifleman needs to be very accurate. So if you know that a shooting is going to take place, you're going to want to know that that rifleman is deadly accurate.
That's right. Yeah, I'd also want to know that he wasn't using a bloody Italian rifle as well. Thanks very much.
So if you know that a shooting is going to take place and you're going to be in the car, then you're going to think, well, he needs to be close and he needs to be a good shot and he needs to have a good, and I need to give him the best shot possible.
Yeah.
So,
and if I'd organised it, so I was having to travel in the car so as not to look suspicious, right? If I'd organised it, I know for a fact all the way down Dealey Plaza I'd be going. I wouldn't be sitting with my bloody head looked forward like that. I'd be telling you, I'd be like, when's he going to crack that shot off?
But they say that I can't remember his name now. Not Kellerman. I think Kellerman was the passenger. So who was the driver? I can't even remember his bloody name now.
I can't either.
So but anyway, they do say he slowed down or stopped and then veered to the left. So I'm not saying that's what happened, but some people say that's what happened. So if he's going down Elm and then he veers to the left, then Kennedy's going to be here and more prone to a shot from over there. So was the driver lining him up for a shot? But then,
so did he veer to the left before the headshot or after?
I think before.
Right.
But with Jackie there, they want to make sure they're not going to hurt her. I mean, she's going to be there in line. You know, I mean, that rifleman, as I said, it's got to be deadly accurate.
Well, from what you just said, if you, let's just say he's coming towards the overpass, right? He's coming towards the overpass. So you've got, let's just say, so you've got the driver there. Hang on, let's do it here. So you've got I don't know if it's reversed on when you see it on the screen, but that is my top left. Is it top right for you?
Top right, yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's the driver then.
Yeah.
No, it's a left-hand drive. That's Connolly. That's Connolly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Connolly.
Yeah.
That would be Jack Kennedy.
That's right. Yeah.
So basically, that's coming towards the underpass.
Yeah.
Veers to the left.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's right.
Like,
yeah.
Like you say,
yeah.
Jack Kennedy, and Jackie's over here. Jackie's well protected.
Yes. So
from a shot from the overpass. All right.
Yeah.
He's in clear bloody view, and that shot there is what takes his head back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, I think to make sure that they didn't hit the women, that would seem the most logical place to fire from, because if it was from the picket fence, then Jackie is sat on the other side of him. So I'm sure they didn't want to hit Jackie. And actually, neither Jackie nor John Connolly's wife were hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing I hadn't thought about before, I don't know in the previous motorcades. So I don't know. Of course, I guess were they in the motorcade the day before? I don't know, but was Jackie sat on that side the day before? Were they sat in the same places, or?
Yeah, I've often asked that question myself. So yeah, I don't know.
So actually, they're sat on both her and Nellie Connolly, John Connolly's wife, are sat there on the same side.
Maybe it's some kind of protocol that the women always sit on the left.
Yeah, it could be. Or were they there out of harm's way kind of thing as well, you know? So, but I agree with you, the triple overpass. So if that shot, where would the bullet go after? You're saying the bullet would disintegrate. Would it, on impact, it wouldn't continue?
Well, so when a bullet, particularly the bullets that they tried to sell us were the offending bullets, those particular bullets, the shell casing on impact with bone, the shell casing, doesn't disintegrate, but it will crumple, it will fragment, it will do all kinds of stuff, right? It won't stay an intact bullet. That's the thing. And that's the thing with the magic bullet they found, right? That magic bullet is supposed to have gone through the back of Kennedy, veered in midair, hit Connolly, and ended up on the floor of the bloody limo, right? Intact.
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert, but even I don't believe that. That's nonsense.
Complete rubbish. Complete rubbish.
So, so the thing I was thinking about was, you know, and they're talking about the magic bullet, it then went into Connolly's body. I was just wondering, especially if they missed, then who is it going to hit? Where's it going to go, kind of thing. Okay, so got John Connolly, then his wife Nellie Connolly. I don't know of any motive she might have, similar to her husband's, I guess. And then in the front seat, we've got Kellerman and the driver, whose name, why can't I remember his name? Oh my God, that's stupid. So Greer, William Greer. So so again, you hear rumor, you don't know what's true. So I've read some Secret Servicemen weren't very happy with Kennedy's politics, his womanizing. Abraham Bolden, the African American guy that Kennedy took on, put into the Secret Service detail. Some of them weren't very happy about that. So, and the thing that I think hasn't been considered, William Greer was a Northern Irishman. He was a Northern Irish orange man. Can you believe that? And so I think that is a side that has been ignored. So, and I can't believe that Kennedy was the first Catholic to be American president. For me, that's unbelievable. So,
why would you say that?
Sorry?
Why would you say it's unbelievable?
Well, I just, you know, why? I mean,
Catholic Church is definitely the minority church in America, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know the numbers, but I'm just kind of very surprised that there had never been a Catholic, you know, I mean, I'm Catholic, but I don't go to church or anything. I was born Catholic, but I don't practice. I don't go to church or anything like that. So, but I think that is an element that hasn't been looked at. So Kennedy, of course, was Catholic, an Irish Catholic. Also, the people like I don't know whether you've ever heard of them, the Clancy brothers. They'd been in the White House singing for the president. They were kind of Irish Republican singers and so on. And of course, at the end of the 60s, I'm not so sure so much in the early 60s, but of course, things were beginning to hot up in Northern Ireland as well. And here we have the driver of the limousine. He's a Northern Irish orange man. And the guy who I think who would have driven the limousine. I'm not absolutely sure, but I think the guy who would have driven the limousine died of a heart problem 3 weeks before or something. So actually there were, I think he had 2 or 3 regular drivers, and the guy I think who'd been scheduled to drive in Dallas, I'm not absolutely sure about that, died at Camp David or one of those retreats that the presidents have. So I forget his name, but he was just found dead, and he died of a heart problem. And apparently a perfectly healthy Secret Service man, I think quite young. Yeah, he died of a heart problem 3-4 weeks just before the assassination, which meant William Greer became the driver. So that's something as well you don't read very much about, that I think he would have been the driver, died 3 or 4 weeks before. But you don't read about that.
No.
Okay, so that's motive within the car. So I think we could, there are probably millions who had motive to kill him, to be honest, but let's just stay in Dealey Plaza for the minute. So my guess is those people who were standing curbside had motive. I think there were a few Cubans there who'd been at the Bay of Pigs.
Has it ever been established, or do we know whether Jack Ruby was actually in Dealey Plaza that day?
Well, I don't know. I mean, people have said he was here, there, and everywhere. I don't know. I mean,
there were so-say photographs of him stood outside the book.
Yeah. I to be honest, I don't know. And you don't know whether it's all these photos, you don't know whether they're authentic, whether they've been photoshopped. It's just difficult to know, to be honest.
I mean, I would. The thing I would say is that if he wasn't in Dealey Plaza that day, why not? Because he obviously had a massive interest in the whole thing, for whatever reason, and he managed to get access into the police department and get that close to Oswald enough to kill him.
Yeah.
Because he had connections and people would let him in and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
If he was so say killing Oswald because he was a patriot, which I think was his defense at the time, and that he was doing the country a favor, then you would have thought that massive amount of patriotism would have compelled him to go and see his commander-in-chief driving by, would you not?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've read accounts that he was at maybe the paper, the Dallas Morning Herald or the Star, I'm not sure.
That would be like me. That would be like me rocking up and say killing the guy who's just shot Kenny Dalglish, right? With the day before, Kenny Dalglish has driven past my house and I'm not around. Do you know what I mean? It's just not. It's just like it's not going to happen, right?
I mean, well, basically, he was just telling a load of lies, wasn't he? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Half truths. Okay, so I think there were people with motives stood roadside. That umbrella man, and then there's the guy next to him that behaving suspiciously. But
have you ever seen a look at Umbrella Man?
Well, I've seen a few names.
Have you ever seen him? Have you ever seen his features?
Well, I've seen. It's difficult to see him close up, but I've kind of seen. Yeah, I've seen it in the photographs. Yeah.
Has it never crossed your mind that he could be Jack Ruby?
No, it hadn't actually. No, you think it could be Jack Ruby?
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
The name I thought was Gordon Novel, although I know some people have said it was Louis DeWitt or something else, and a few other names. Yeah, I've never thought that it could be Jack Ruby. I'll take another look, although from my memory, I wouldn't say that was Jack Ruby, but I will have another look.
It's like I said before, with the people scurrying towards the book depository. It's like Hitchcock. There's a fair few that actually look like they could be Jack Ruby. It's like well, the whole thing about Jack Ruby, like you say, he's all over the place. You can actually, if you want to, you can see him everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think also the name. There's the guy that was next to the Umbrella Man. I've seen a name who I think it was, but I can't remember. It was a Cuban guy. So yeah, I think there were a few bystanders who probably had motives. Then if you go into the 2 cars back, you've got the vice president. So as I said before, Lyndon Johnson definitely had a lot of motive. So he was in big trouble. So that day, believe it or not, Bobby Baker, who was his sidekick, was getting quizzed about corruption. And he was going down by all accounts, and Life magazine was going to publish it all the following week. And what happened when the Kennedy assassination happened? They got the Zapruder film. They dropped the Johnson corruption story, and of course they got the biggest story with the Zapruder film and everything.
Yeah.
So I think basically there were a lot of people with motive, the oil man, the treasury, because also he was the dollar. So I think I'm not sure exactly what it was all about, but I think the printing of the money was contracted out. Is that right? Or
yeah.
And they what he was going to do was he was going to get the treasury to make their own money. I think it's something like that. And of course, if they contracted the money out, they had to pay the going rate. So also politically, he was looking. It looks like he was looking to withdraw soldiers from Vietnam. He wasn't going to go down the road that the CIA wanted him to go down. He had a lot of enemies, political enemies. So there were a lot of people with motive. So unless you wanted to add anything about the motive, who benefited and all that, Jace, I think we can move on and start looking at who organized his trip.
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt that the most obvious motive, heaviest motive, was Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah, but I don't think Lyndon Johnson could have pulled it all off all by himself. I think he would have needed other agencies within government to make sure he didn't get caught myself.
Oh, and I think he would have absolutely had that support.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, because they all benefited basically. That also Hoover, he was going to get kicked out. Bobby Kennedy was giving him a really hard time, so
yeah,
he was finished.
Yeah.
The only thing, Johnson was going to be finished. Hoover was going to be finished. Dulles was already finished, and then he
pops up on the commission.
Yeah. I was going to say something there, and then I forgot what it was.
There were a lot of people that were finished or had been finished or were about to be finished.
Yeah.
By the Kennedy brothers.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden after the assassination came to prominence.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, also, what you call him? Was it Trafficante or Marcello? He had just walked 30 minutes. Can you believe it? On the very day that Jack Kennedy got murdered, is it Marcello or Trafficante walked out of court free?
Yeah.
Bobby Kennedy had thrown him out of the country, been down in Honduras or something, out in the middle of nowhere, in the jungle.
Yeah.
And then 30 minutes after walking out of court, John Kennedy's dead.
No, thanks. I'm all right. Thank you. Yeah.
So, the other thing about that as well, they say that I haven't seen the DiCaprio film about Hoover. Have you seen that?
No.
So, but they say that the mafia had some revealing pictures of Hoover, didn't they, with his the deputy director. So they were an item, weren't they?
Really? Right.
I forget the guy's name, but and Hoover said there was never any mafia in America. And the reason he said that was because the mafia had a load of dirty pictures on him. They also say that James Angleton used the same modus operandi. He just used to blackmail his enemies. He'd get all the dirt on them. So that's what Hoover did as well. Do you reckon he had a load of dirt on the Kennedys, and that's why they didn't publicly say anything? Because they say that Bobby Kennedy was involved in the Marilyn Monroe death. I'm not sure whether that's true or not.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously she had links, didn't she? She had links to the mafia as well.
Oh, I didn't know she had links to the mafia.
Well, yeah. I mean, she used to be one of Frank Sinatra's conquests, and he had strong links to the mafia. Yeah.
The other thing I had thought about as well, I often wondered, why were the Kennedys so reticent or publicly reticent? And I just wonder, behind the scenes, where the things were taken care of behind the scenes. I mean, Johnson died in the early 70s. Hoover died in the early 70s. Cliff Carter died in the early 70s. Malcolm Wallace died in the early 70s. I just wonder whether there was a bit of retribution that went on that we don't know about. What do you reckon?
Oh, yeah. And I think that retribution kind of followed the Kennedy family. It was very, very tit for tat. I think in the early 70s as well, you had the whole Chappaquiddick incident with Ted Kennedy.
Yeah, that was late 60s, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, but that ruined his future, because he was thinking of running for president. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then Kennedy's father, Joe Kennedy, he had such a dodgy background, like unbelievably dodgy background, which Jack was at pains to try and keep all at bay when he was running for president, and so on and so forth. And then you've got Jack Kennedy's son, John F. Kennedy Jr. in that plane crash.
Yeah.
You know, when he was starting to think about becoming a politician and all this kind of crap, and it's just like, hang on a minute. It's just like, talk about history repeating itself. It just kept on and on and on and on.
He had John Kennedy Jr. He had a magazine, and the name of the magazine was George.
Yeah.
So some people say that was like a message, as in George Bush.
Yeah.
I think also, was it Bobby Kennedy's son or John Kennedy's son? I think it was Bobby Kennedy's son. When Caesar, was it Gus Caesar? Oh, is he the Arsenal player? I'm getting confused. But the that security guard that that was taking Bobby Kennedy through the kitchen. Was it Guy Caesar? His name was Caesar, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I think Bobby Kennedy's, so that Caesar died last year or not very long ago, and he was saying the man who killed my father has died. Yeah.
Right.
And I think the name of that security firm he worked for was called ABC Security.
That's almost as bad as Acme.
Yeah, I know. So, and that guy worked for Lockheed, but they had a special CIA section, which Robert Mayhew, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, ran. And he was Howard Hughes' right-hand man. So they say Robert Mission Impossible was based on Robert Mayhew's operation. He used to do the jobs that the CIA couldn't do. So the CIA used to go to him for the jobs. Yeah. Yeah. And if you remember the old TV series of Peter Graves, and Leonard Nimoy was in that as well, wasn't it? Was he in that, Leonard Nimoy?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
But if you remember, they had that truck they used to use, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I was just thinking of that truck in, we were looking at those trucks parked on Elm Street.
That is not delivering bread, right?
Was it towels, wasn't it?
Something like that. Yeah.
So, okay, yeah. So I think there were a lot of people with motive. There were other sort of more raw motives like racism and so on. But anyway, so let's look at who conceived the trip to Dallas and who organized it. So,
well, while we're on the subject of motive, it might be just poignant to drop in at this point.
Yeah.
Who had the least amount of motive in Dealey Plaza on that day?
Am I meant to? Is that a rhetorical question, or am I meant to answer?
Well, kind of. But I would say out of all the key players, the one that had the least amount of motive was probably Lee Harvey Oswald.
All right. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. That was he. Some people say he loved Kennedy's, and then his public profile suggests he wouldn't have done. I mean,
I'm just pretty certain. I'm pretty convinced that actually Lee Harvey Oswald was a spy, right? So the actual person, Lee Harvey Oswald, I think was a spy. He was sent to Russia under the guise of defecting to Russia, blah blah blah. But he was also working with like the U-2 missiles, not the U-2 spy planes, rather, not the missiles, the U-2 spy planes. Now, whether or not the same person that was in the book depository was exactly the same person as Lee Harvey Oswald is another thing altogether. Meanwhile, Lee Oswald is been told, Lee Harvey Oswald has been told that part of his mission is to be somewhere else at the time of the shooting, and that somewhere else just happened to be in the region of Officer Tippett, right, etc., etc.
Yeah,
I just think he was just a puppet in all of it, to be honest. And I think, if you are a spy, and maybe not a particularly very good one, or whatever, you are going to be manipulated. You are going to be told to do certain things and be in certain places at certain times, right? Otherwise, your Russian wife is going to get sent home, or your Russian kids, or your half Russian kids are going to get deported or whatever, and your mum's suddenly not going to have a comfortable lifestyle in the home that she's got, and all of this kind of crap, right? Yeah, I think there's a hell of a lot more to the whole Oswald backstory than meets the eye.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I heard some people say actually he was part of a twin brother program and all that kind of stuff. So I don't.
It wouldn't be at all surprised. I also wouldn't be at all surprised that actually, he was doing what he was doing as a Russian spy, not out of his love of communism, but probably for his hatred of it. In which case, he would then have no motive whatsoever to shoot Jack Kennedy. Right?
Okay, so yeah, there were certainly some big players who had a lot more motive than he did.
Yeah.
Okay, so this trip, so how far in advance do you think they would have, if it was a conspiracy to kill him, and the people who killed him could influence the organization of the trip, how far in advance do you think it was conceived? Just, I think officially it was proposed 6 months before or something like that. But do you think that's when they started getting the idea, or do you think it was born a lot longer, further before that?
No, I think they saw. I think the Texas trip was planned, and I think that the conspirators saw it as an ideal opportunity. Because of the nature of Texas and all of that kind of stuff. And, if ever you were going to get a lone nutter, it was going to be in Texas, right? Because there were so many disparate politics and everything going on. But in terms of the actual planning of how they were going to do it, I would say a couple of days, really. Obviously the area or the vicinity was already planned and in place. But like I said to you, the route was changed, I think 24 hours before, I think. Right? And the decision to take the bubble off was last minute. In fact, that bubble miraculously reappeared at bloody Parkland Hospital. Right? Now you know me, I know a bit about cars, and I'm telling you that a bloody bubble for a Lincoln Continental is not an easy thing to bloody transport around, right? It's not like you can stick it in the back of your bloody car or put it in the trunk, right? I reckon you'd have to have a van, maybe a towel van or whatever, to get a bloody bubble from wherever. It was at the airfield, because that was that's where the car obviously came from, because it comes on the back of one of those transport planes, obviously where the bubble was as well. But that bubble suddenly reappeared out of nowhere and was put on the car at Parkland.
Yeah.
Right? So it was at the very last minute that it was decided that bubble was not going to be on that car. And like you said about the positioning of the seating in the vehicle, they wouldn't have wanted Jack Kennedy sat where Jackie was, because he would have been further away from the people. Because all the people somehow knew that he was going to be on that side of the car, so they were all lining the pavement. They weren't on the other side, were they? Yeah. There was a little scattering of people on the other side, on Jackie's side, but they weren't like. What I'm saying is, like, whenever you see like a member of royalty or whatever in this country, in England, you see the streets lined both sides, don't you? Like with 10, 12 deep people, because they never really know which side who is going to be on, right? And I know we drive on the left-hand side of the road and all that kind of stuff, but you never see everybody piling over to the left and one or two people on the other side. It's always both sides, heavily lined.
The other thing about the Dallas is, because there were false alarms in Chicago and Miami. So, but I've also read that some people say actually they weren't really false alarms. They were actually dry runs. They were just rehearsals, yeah, for the big event, as I've heard some people refer to it. So when do you think they decided they needed to get rid of him? I mean, was it when he got elected? Was it a year or two into his presidency? Was it after one particular event? Was it because maybe something like the Marilyn Monroe death, something we don't know about? I mean, what do you reckon triggered? Was it just a series of things, or was it one thing that made up their mind? What do you reckon?
I think it was a series of things. I mean, they'd never had a president like him before. They'd never had a president who was prepared to challenge establishment, challenge the existing authorities, and also challenge the way that they did things. I also think that America has a lot to answer for in its history in terms of deep-rooted racism and all of that kind of stuff, like the Ku Klux Klan and blah, blah, blah. Rights for whites and no rights for blacks, all that kind of stuff, right? They've got a lot to answer for. And I think at those times, I mean, it was the whole race thing was a big thing, but also war was as well, right?
Yeah.
So, he'd already avoided the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
And Vietnam was hot on the agenda. Yeah. And I think it was a combination of all of those things, but I think the thing that actually sort of rang his death bell was his decision that they were going to start pulling out of Vietnam, right? And not pulling out, but not actually go into Vietnam, right? I think he had decided that Vietnam was not going to be a thing, right? America could lose an awful lot of money if they didn't go to Vietnam.
Yeah, I mean, people like
we know that Johnson was well in favor of Vietnam. We know that.
Also, General Dynamics, they were based in Fort Worth, I think. Bell helicopter.
Yeah.
Lyndon Johnson used to fly around in the Bell helicopter when he was electioneering in the 1940s. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I can believe it. I can. And like I said, war is the biggest multi-billion-dollar industry in America.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's pretty big in the UK. It's big in the UK as well, to be honest.
Yeah, you're right. And there's only been a handful of years where America hasn't actually been at war with somebody.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it's in a place that nobody even knows or cares about in the middle of nowhere, they've always been in conflict with somebody or some other, right? And it generates an awful lot of money.
Yeah.
And I think people were worried for their own, gain, livelihoods, whatever, that Jack Kennedy was actually changing the world for the better, but for them, for the worse. Right?
Yeah, I think also the Johnsons I think they had shares in General Dynamics or Bell Helicopter or both.
Yeah. Yeah, and like we said, America at that time in the 60s, the early 60s, was deep rooted in a lot of criminal organizations. You had the Teamsters Union, you had the mafia, you had all kinds of stuff going on. Robert Kennedy was cleaning all that up, right? Robert Kennedy was cleaning all that up with Jack's backing. In fact, Jack, made him Attorney General, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
People didn't like it. People definitely wanted the Kennedys, not just Jack Kennedy. People wanted the Kennedys wiped off the face of the earth.
Okay, so you say there were a series of events that explain why they wanted to get rid of him. When do you think they started organizing the assassination?
I would even go as far as to say the minute he was elected, because they weren't expecting him to get elected. It was a shock victory. It was a shock victory.
And what about deciding it would be Dallas? I mean, when did they decide it would be Dallas, do you think?
I think as soon as the diary was out that he was going here, there, and everywhere, I think that's the place they would have chosen. If it had gone somewhere like I don't know, New Orleans, for example,
yeah,
it would have been harder to pull off.
Yeah.
I mean, out of all the geographical sites in America that you could think of, that you could list, that whole little previously unheard of place called Dealey Plaza, right?
And who do you think organized that route that would bring him to his death? Who organized it? Was it the Johnson entourage? Was it the Secret Service? Was it the police? Who ultimately made the big decisions that he would go down Elm Street and so on?
Again, there's a school of thought that, if you've got a conspiracy where like hundreds of people are involved, then the truth's going to come out because at least one person is going to, tell the truth or whatever. But I think they were all so intrinsically linked with each other to the point where people would have been scared to tell the truth, right? Because they would be looking constantly over their shoulder every minute of the day, looking under their car, tentatively opening their front door, all of that kind of stuff, looking for tripwires and blah, 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 for the rest of their lives, had anybody open their mouth about it. And I think they were all so intrinsically linked that I don't think you could even pinpoint it to one organization. I think they were all completely hand in hand and devoted to removing the Kennedys from power.
So, for example, you were talking about, I think there's a bit of debate over exactly when that route was announced. So I think the day before, I've heard other people say it was on the morning. So, but I was reading as well that I think it was the day, was it the day before? Or was it, no, it must have been earlier in the week. So the Secret Service, they have like the White House detail, but they also have like local offices around the country. So apparently, I think it must have been earlier in the week. Or was it? Yeah, because the White House would send an advance man down to wherever it was the president was visiting. So I think Winston Lawson, Winston Lawson, he was the Washington man, I believe. So he went down to Dallas and he met up with Forrest Sorrells, who was the Dallas Secret Service guy. And apparently they got in a car with Jesse Curry, who was the DPD chief of police, I think, wasn't he? Chief of police. And they drove from Love Field to the corner of Maine and Houston, or Houston and Maine. Maine and Houston, I guess you'd say Maine and Houston. And apparently, again, you're reading these things and it's like one story from Jesse Curry and another story from the Secret Service, not forgetting that when the Assassination Review Board was investigating things in the 1990s, the Secret Service burnt all the documents they had. So according to the Secret Service, Jesse Curry drove them to the corner of Main and Houston. And then when they got there, he turned away, left, I think, and just said, oh, and from here, you just go down the expressway, the highway to the trademark kind of thing, and didn't tell them that actually at that corner that the motorcade would be turning right onto Houston and then onto Elm. That's what the official version. You don't know whether that's true or not. I don't know. But even if hold on. So let me just finish. Even if that were true, but Forrest Sorrells was the Dallas man. So if he's working in Dallas, surely he's going to know. He's going to know about that, isn't he? Winston Lawson's not going to know, but the Secret Service man based in Dallas, you would think, would know.
You would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, did you want to, sorry, I cut.
No, it's fine. I was just going to say that if you, from my theatrical background, if you want the perfect location, you get a location manager to go and suss it out, right? Doobie Plaza was the perfect location for a triangulation of Crossfire. Perfect. I mean, you'd have to travel literally probably 50 states before you could find somewhere ideally suited, more ideally suited for that to happen than where it was. You know, like a little place that nobody had ever heard of before, right? Perfect triangulation of Crossfire with a quick escape route if you needed it, right?
Yes.
Let's just say that assassination attempt had failed, gone horribly wrong for the people that were trying to carry it out. They needed a quick escape route, right? And that was bombing straight out from underneath the overpass, right, out onto the freeway. And if you think about it, he was actually only a couple of minutes away from being in the clear anyway, wasn't he? It didn't appear that they had any kind of backup plan other than possibly having other gunmen in different vantage points. So like if he what I'm saying is if the assassination attempt had missed or failed or whatever at that particular point, right, he would have gone under the underpass, what do you want to call it, got the other side, and he'd have been scot-free and in the clear, right? JFK.
Well, I've heard stories that there were bombs. There was a bomb somewhere further along the route and all that kind of stuff. I don't know whether that's true or not.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is there was no backup plan that we knew about. So whoever it was that pulled the trigger or triggers had to get it right. They had to get it right. You know, and yeah, it's the more you think about it, the more you talk about it, the more it actually just sends chills down your spine, I think, anyway, personally.
Okay, so so this was conceived a long time beforehand. You also got to think to get him to go to Dallas needed to be done by people in powerful positions, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it wasn't his choice to remove the bubble either. People say it was, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the guy, but there was a guy who went AWOL in Europe.
Yeah,
he worked for the forces, American forces in Europe. I think he worked in intelligence. And he dealt with some intelligence a few weeks before the assassination, in which they had a tip-off that there was going to be an assassination attempt from an armed forces kind of element. And he tried, did he go to prison, or they put him in a mental hospital or something like that? So it's like, it's like that similar story to that Richard Nagel. You know that story, Richard Nagel? He robbed or he pretended to rob a bank. You all right? You all right?
Yeah, I'm suffering a bit. Yes.
So, but he couldn't get anybody to believe him. So he was reporting that there was an armed, and I forget what was the name of that guy that Oswald was supposed to have taken aim at, Edwin Walker, wasn't it? Was it Edwin Walker?
Mm.
So I mean, that sounds like could have been who that intelligence officer was referring to. So also, what was the name of that guy? Roger Stone. He wrote a book about the assassination 7 or 8 years ago. And he was worked with Trump, believe it or not. But he was saying he spoke to Cabot-Lodge.
Mm.
So I think Cabot-Lodge, was he the ambassador in Vietnam at the time of the assassination? But I think Roger Stone was saying he spoke to the ambassador's brother in the late 70s. And he suggested that a lot of people had known in government that JFK was going to be, there was a hit out on him. They knew it. That's what he was saying.
I think a lot of people knew it was going to happen before it happened.